This is the Energy Makers Show, featuring the innovators, financiers, and policymakers focused on the global energy demand. Brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And here's your host, Paul Dickerson.
Hi, I'm Paul Dickerson, and welcome to another episode of the Energy Makers Show. First up, Fred Enochs, partner at TD International, a company helping energy companies around the globe assess their political risk, their security risk, all these above ground risks. Next up, Cliff West, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Cub Energy. This company focused exclusively on natural gas production in Ukraine. Gas selling, by the way, at $12 to $14 an MCF, not the $2.50 we have here in America. All that right after this.
Where will the energy come from to move us forward? From natural sources in abundant supply, or perhaps a man-made source? At NRG, we believe innovation will solve our energy needs. That's why NRG is moving away from fossil fuels towards wind, solar, and other sustainable technologies to power the smart grid, the electric car, and our clean energy future. We're using all of our energy to develop more of it.
This is the Energy Makers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now, back to the Energy Makers Show with your host, Paul Dickerson.
Welcome back to the Energy Makers Show. Our guest now, Fred Enochs, a partner with TD International. Fred, great to have you on the program.
Paul, thanks for having me.
So tell us about TD International.
TD International has been around for about 12 years now, headquartered in Washington, D.C. with an office in Houston. We really specialize in providing our clients with the best information and intelligence to help them make better business decisions. A lot of that in the energy space focuses on above ground risk. And
above ground risk, I know that below ground risk, people in the oil patch know about that, but help our audience understand what you
Sure.
mean.
Well, obviously the below ground side is all the technical piece and everything else of extracting, but above ground are all those other risks involved that can cause your project or your investment to go upside down. Everything from political risk, corruption, security, threat-related risk, anything like that, counterparties, bad reputations, all those things that you wrap together that can cause you significant problems, especially in an international environment.
Well, and what are some examples of that? We've seen, for example, the Syrian president has come out talking about some of his chemical weapons and some of these other the Arab Spring in general. I'm sure a lot of energy companies are wondering what to do in the region.
Sure. I mean, the most prominent one you see all the time is corruption related, like FCPA, but a lot of the other things that we see, again, looking at Libya, for example, in the Arab Spring, a lot of companies were ill-prepared to understand the political risk at the time. And now as you see a new coalition government forming, it's really trying to understand who are the power makers now, who's controlling the energy industry, who do you have to deal with? Are your leases and agreements you have in place, are they still going to be valid, or are they going to try and extract some more value from you? So it's really understanding all those risks associated with something like that to help you make a decision on your business plan.
Well, yeah, let's use Libya. So I'm interested in moving into Libya and expanding some gas or oil operations. How could you help me there?
So Libya is a good example. If you look at going into Libya right now, in most cases you're going to have an in-country business partner or an agent or partner with somebody. First thing you have to understand is, who is this partner? What is their reputation? Do they have a bad history of corruption? Things I have to be concerned about, not just from an FCPA standpoint, but this is my partner. What are they going to do to my reputation or my image? Second, you have to understand the political risk. The new government's forming. How is this new government, which is still undetermined, going to deal with you as an energy client? How are they going to negotiate with you when it comes to leasing or other agreements, and figuring out the political landscape there? And on top of that, right now, you still have a fairly significant security and threat risk there, because there's still a lot of tension and other things going on in the country that you really got to factor into your risk planning when you're making a decision if you want to go into Libya.
And for our audience that hasn't read the code, FCPA is?
Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. It was established, I believe, in the 70s, but the real enforcement has occurred mostly over about the last 10 years.
And what's the goal?
The goal was to prevent bribery of foreign officials.
And doesn't that put U.S. companies maybe at a disadvantage over
It certainly can. If you look at the global environment right now, chasing commodity resources, Europe is starting to come along with the UK Bribery Act, which is very similar. The British follow that. The U.S. follows FCPA. Some other European countries follow other corruption ones, but there are a lot of nations that do not abide by those rules. So it certainly can give them an advantage in some of these more developing nations.
How does a company based out of Washington, D.C. even know?
One of the things that we think differentiates us and where you need to be, understanding the above ground risk in places like Africa, Eastern Europe, or Libya, you really have to have boots on the ground. Sitting at a computer terminal doing Google searches, database exploitation, it's not going to give you those pieces of information you need in these opaque environments. You have to have seasoned people on the ground that know how to pull records, know how to do investigative work, that know the industry, that know the government. That's the folks we have around the world that we use as we need to help us pull those pieces together, provide our clients with information, and then continue to give them advisory services going on throughout the issues.
So truly giving on-the-ground assessments, and then once your client is in country, continuing to work with them.
We often continue to work with them throughout. If it's an ongoing issue, we advise them as they move through the process, whether it's negotiating or a lot of times it's on the back end. Even though you have everything put in place up front, a lot of times clients come to us when circumstances changes. As you've seen a lot in Africa, they may come to you with some form of soft expropriation that no longer, your leases are no longer valid, that we want to renegotiate the terms, right. Or there may be somebody else there who's trying to edge you out of your concession. We often get called in then to come in and figure out what's wrong, how do we address this, and how do we work our way through the issue.
So tell me about these boots on the ground.
Well, one of the things we've done, and it's sort of the premise of our business, is we've gone back and we've taken what we consider some of the best intelligence gathering practices learned from our U.S. government days, and we take that and we apply those principles in a commercial scene, in this case oil and gas, and we have, I would say, recruited, for lack of a better term, we have very unique assets around the world that we use as we need to help us pull that information together.
Well, are there areas that you don't cover?
I would say it'd be pretty hard to find areas where we haven't done work or aren't currently doing work, but occasionally those do come up, and one of the things we've done is we excel at creating a collection platform of individuals, and we will find the pieces we need in those new environments to put in place that can reach the information we need and pull that together.
We're in a re-election season for President Obama, or we're going to see the election of Romney. How has the current administration affected FCPA legislation or even enforcement or anti-bribery or some of the others, and what might we expect in the next 4 or 5 years?
I don't think anybody in the energy space right now hasn't heard of FCPA. The energy space is probably one of the most targeted areas. The Department of Justice has been very aggressive in that regards as it relates to going after companies. One of the things I've seen is finally a better understanding from companies in the energy space of we have to have good programs in place, we have to have proper training, and we've got to do good due diligence, because the failure to do so, even though your intentions are right, you're going to bring the ire of the Department of Justice on you. One of the changes we've seen because of all the pressure in the last few years is we used to get called in on the back end when Department of Justice was knocking on the door and you were being accused of doing something wrong. With the current administration, the pressure being put on, we're seeing a lot more work on the front end where companies are trying to do the right thing up front so they can avoid the problem on the back end.
Well, and so then to be clear, you're not just helping U.S. companies work with other nations. You're helping U.S. companies also work with within our own laws.
Correct. We deal with obviously FCPA as well as the UK Bribery Act, but we help them deal primarily with making sure their standards, their best practices are going to meet Department of Justice standings of what they want to see done, especially on the due diligence and work in these countries.
As you look around the globe, what are some of the more challenging places to do business?
I think if I look at where we are today with the expansion of oil and gas activities in Africa, that's probably the largest area. We're seeing people go into places where they haven't been before, and some of these environments are extremely tough. The information's opaque. The level of corruption is tremendous. These are very difficult areas, as well as Eastern Europe with the ex-Soviet Union area. there's a lot of opportunity there, but dealing in that environment, Ukraine and places like that are extremely challenging.
Well, Fred, it's fascinating. Thank you so much for coming in today.
I appreciate your time, Paul. Thank you very much.
And that wraps our discussion with Fred Enochs. We'll be back with more right after this.
The future is here.
You can't see it. It's electric.
At NRG, we're providing clean energy and now charging stations to make the electric car a reality. Kinda makes you want a boogie woogie, doesn't it? NRG, moving clean energy forward.
It's electric.
This is the Energy Makers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now back to the Energy Makers Show with your host, Paul Dickerson.
Welcome back to the Energy Makers Show. Our guest now, Cliff West, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Cub Energy. Cliff, great to have you on the program.
Paul, it's great to be here.
So tell us about Cub Energy.
Cub Energy, we're an exploration development company focused on natural gas in Ukraine.
Exclusively Ukraine.
We're exclusively Ukraine now, and we intend, and I have no intentions of changing in the near future. We have a great group of licenses that we can develop, and we're looking forward to doing that over the next few years.
Well, and you're traded on a Canadian exchange?
That's correct. We're listed on the Toronto's Venture Exchange.
But tell us, you're drilling for gas.
That is correct. And we have two areas in Ukraine that we're working in, the eastern side for one group of properties and the western side for the other. And both sides are very gas prone. So Ukraine, the Dnepr-Donetsk basin that we're working in is primarily a gas basin, although there is some oil production. But our production is primarily gas production, yes.
And again, we're talking Ukraine nestled between Poland and Russia. We hear lots of stories there, but I think it'll be fascinating to hear what it's like on the ground. Is it industrialized, or how's the workforce?
Where we operate is in the western part. That's where our operations are. The properties that we actually operate and control. In the western part, west of the Carpathian Mountains, what they call the Trans-Carpathian Basin. And the people that we deal with over there are very, very cooperative. We've had good relationships with the government officers and the bureaucrats in the government that allow you to have the ability to permit your wells, permit your seismic, and go forward with your work program. The thing that's really good about our company right now is that we have the 9 licenses that we have, and they're all privately owned licenses.
And it's a fair number of acres, right?
Yes, we have on the order of 174,000 acres, or in North American parlance, that would equate to somewhere around 7+ townships of real estate to explore for oil and gas in, primarily gas in this case.
So tell me about the workforce.
They have very good engineers, very good geologists, very good earth science people. The problem, if there is a problem, or the challenge for us, is to get them good equipment to work with.
Well, and from what I hear, you've got a fairly entrepreneurial CEO who's done a lot of that.
Absolutely, that's to say the least. He's Michael Afendikov, our chairman and CEO, recognized several years ago that we had to have better equipment in the country if we were going to develop oil and gas fields similar to what we do here in the U.S. or in the Western world, I suppose. And
tell us about some of the price differences.
That's really a very good reason to be in Ukraine right now is the gas price. We have we are fortunate enough to be able to realize approximately $12 per 1,000 cubic feet of gas in Ukraine now. That's after the VAT charges.
Remind our audience, how much is an MCF?
It varies from day to day. The last time I checked, it was about $2.50 on the exchange.
So $2.50 in the United States versus a $12 after the VAT?
That is correct, and that's really nice.
And are you selling that gas domestically in Ukraine?
Paul, we're selling it to domestic users, from mom and pop operations to large industrial complexes, and that we sell our gas on a month-to-month basis, and it's we're fortunate enough to be paid for it a month in advance. So that always helps as well.
Well, and with the 9 different leases, is that a 1-year project, a 5-year project, a 10-year project?
The licenses that we have, the way Ukraine works out, you start out with an exploration license, which is typically 3 to 5 years that you have to explore and bring a license to the development stage. Right now we have most of our licenses, actually more than half of our licenses are in the development stage. And what that means is that you have to continue to do work on the licenses, but the government has awarded you a 20-year license as opposed to a 3 to 5 year exploratory license. So the licenses that we have just converted have been converted this year into development licenses. So we have 20 years to work on those licenses.
Plenty of time.
Yeah, and those licenses are actually we'll probably be producing for 20 years because we've found some really nice reserves, and we have high expectations of finding additional reserves on those licenses as well.
And will Cub always, for its existence, work in the Ukraine, or do you see expansion outside in the region?
We have enough work to keep us busy for many years in Ukraine.
Well, Cliff, it's a great story. Congratulations on the success, and thanks for coming in.
Paul, you're quite welcome. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure, Cliff. It really is. And that concludes this episode of the Energy Makers Show, heard on the radio nationwide and seen right here at TheEnergyMakers.com. I'm Paul Dickerson, and we'll see you next week.